And that's going to be chemtrails and flat earth.
Okay. Yeah, those tend to be very big.
We don't have a chemtrail switch on the aircraft. So with that, we're going to take off with engine anti-ice on. Regardless of whether there's snow, sleet, ice, even if it's water, that can become ice below 10 degrees when it goes into the engine. We'll take off with engine anti-ice on, but as far as on the aircraft for de-icing or anti-icing, you're going to look to see if there's ice on the aircraft.
Delays are not always bad. This is a perfect weekend just to sit back and watch my interview with my old friend and JetBlue Captain, Chris McCleskey. He's going to answer some questions that I've always wanted to ask an airline captain. If he doesn't get to yours, please feel free to leave it down in the comments. He said that I can ask him and he'll send me back the answer and I'll post them just for you. While you're here, please like and subscribe and share it with someone that might like it. Sit back and enjoy, and thank you for joining us. Now, if you wouldn't mind, introduce yourself on a professional note and professional level and tell everybody who you are.
All right, I'm Chris McCleskey. I think I'm here to talk about aviation stuff. So I am a 20-year JetBlue captain. I've been in professional aviation since 1998. Started out flight instructing actually at a local airport in Georgia. And that's just kind of the short and dirty of it.
What gets you up in the mornings? Like, what keeps you going back every day? Is it the love of flying? What is it that makes you get up and go there every day?
Well, I've got the greatest office in the world. You talk about the window office or the corner office at the top of, name your skyscraper. I've got the best one in the world, 36,000 feet. You can't beat the view. The sun rises in the mornings. I don't see too many sunsets anymore because of the type of flying I do, but when I went out to the left coast, seeing the sunsets. But, at the end of the day, it's a job. It's a fantastic job.
Yeah.
It's not a hobby. I don't go where I want to go. I go where the piece of paper tells me to go. I go where I'm paid to go. But it's a great job. And, paycheck's pretty good incentive to show up for work.
Sure. Now, what is your typical day like through aviation? Like once you get to the airport or, all that, what's your typical day like?
My day typically actually starts about 2 hours before I get to the airport, before I show up to the van to go to the airport. And some of that's just me personally. I like to wake up a little early, get ready to go. And we normally have what we call a dispatch release available to us early. Everything we do now is electronic. So we get the release. I can go through it. I can check to make sure all the required parts of it are there. Also, I can download the flight plan on our Jeppesen app on the iPads that we have. And doing international flying, there's some certain monitoring marks that you have to put on that, so I can have everything ready to go before I show up to even get, to even go to the airport. Once at the airport, with the type of flying I'm doing now, we have a briefing where we call our dispatchers back in New York, or when I'm leaving out of Boston, we call the dispatchers in New York. And that's usually about a 10-minute briefing where we talk about the airplane, we talk about the weather, any anomalies that are going on. Anomalies can be solar flares, anything like that could affect GPS, could affect our radios. And the radios are the most common one, with HF being affected by solar flares, more common than anything else. And even then, I say it's more common, but it's not that common. And then we head out to the airplane on those flights. Most of the time, there's 3 of us. We have what we call a relief pilot, and the pilot flying will either be me or first officer. We'll set up the airplane. The relief pilot will go do the pre-flight outside the airplane, make sure everything is in working order on the outside. I'll brief our in-flight crew, and that involves how long the flight's going to be, any areas of known turbulence, any areas where we think it's going to be turbulent, anything special going on with the route on that particular day. Our ETOPS, and ETOPS is how far out we are from our nearest suitable airport, and we do 120, 160, and 180. How far are we away from our nearest suitable airport and what that airport is, and then ask them any specials they've got.
And that's today. So let's rewind and go back to what got you started in aviation, because from, like I've told the viewers, I don't remember you as the pilot type. I thought for sure that you would have been a famous musician right out of high school, honestly. But so, what led you to aviation and the love of flying?
Uh, what led me to aviation is actually before I ever met you. My dad was a crop duster when I was a kid. So I took my first airplane ride in a Piper Pawnee in about 1975 in a little dirt strip that's no longer in existence, where they used to put chemicals and fuel in the airplane. There's a concrete pad there. I actually took my kids there a couple years ago, and showed them where Dad took his first plane ride. But I started, flying with my dad some in crop dusters when I was a kid. So I kind of had the bug early before I was 2 years old. And music was always a secondary love. So I did not go to an aviation college, and I actually in college worked for a retired session musician. And but talking with him, I'm like, kind of got two choices of where to go. One of them is a longer road to hoe, and you still may never make it. And there are a lot of people who are a lot more talented musically than I've ever been who don't make it. And then there was aviation, and I'm like, I'm gonna try that route because at least I know it'll be a job I love, and I still pick up the guitar and play, but it's a hobby. It's something I can do for fun.
So, in saying that, do you think that that was kind of always your plan? I mean, like, did you have the love of that early to say one day I'm going to be a pilot in the back of your mind or anything like that?
I always wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to fly in the military, wore glasses in the 1996, 97. You did not fly in the military with glasses. I went to North Georgia College, which is an Army school. They let me jump out of C-130s. I won't say perfectly good airplanes because it's a C-130, which is a great airplane, but when you see a guy probably for show wrapping duct tape around a hydraulic line, you're raising your hand, can I be the first one out? But flying was always in the back of my mind. I intentionally chose not to get a degree in aviation because that kind of limits you to there's where I'm going. But the industry had turned around significantly between 1990 and 1996 97 when I was getting out of college, and decided that it was kind of time to make a play for that and just see where it went.
So, not having that in your education, did you go maybe on hunch or go maybe on somebody's reference to figure out what path that you needed to take to go where you are today?
Well, I took like everybody, I took a discovery flight. I'd been up a bunch of times. I knew what it was like, and started out of McCollum Airport, real close in Kennesaw, Georgia, and got my private there. And one of my fraternity brothers, his dad was a captain for, I believe it was Legend Air at the time, it went out of business really quickly. It was kind of a flash in the pan, but he had also been at Eastern. And this guy didn't know me from Adam, but my fraternity brother's like, call my dad. This is what he does. So I called this guy up out of the blue, said, hey, I went to college with your son. He's like, oh yeah, Chris told me about you. This guy, I probably talked to him 5, 6, 7, 8 times over the course of flight instructing, and what should I do as far as should I fly for a commuter airline or go to fly air ambulance or charter or something like that. And this guy really kind of didn't mentor me so much with flying, but as far as a career path and option A versus option B, and here's how they go. So that's kind of where the mentor aspect of how to flow up, where that came from.
What was the hardest part about your training?
I think I was just so enthralled with flying. Obviously, you study a lot, learning the different regulations. That's probably the hardest part, was learning the regulations, and literally you almost have to be a lawyer to be a professional pilot. I think a lot of us think we're lawyers, even though we're not. But I was so enthralled, and it was so interesting to me. There wasn't a part where I'm like, man, this is just tough at any point in time. I mean, there were definitely sections where I'm studying more than other parts, but there was nothing that stood out to me as being, I'm not sure if this is going to be for me or not.
Right. So you had seen enough in your private pilot and then your instrument rating before you went to go that path? I'm assuming to make you more comfortable.
Yeah, I was about halfway through my instrument rating when I decided, yeah, this is what I want to do. Okay. So I'm sure it's not just fly for fun. It's like I want to do this for a living. So
now the gentleman that you called that gave you that shot, I would assume was one mentor there. Was there anybody in your furthering your education that you relied on to kind of help you out?
Not really. That was pretty much the point of contact. There were other people that were, when I was a flight instructor, that were getting on with regional airlines and that sort of thing, and you talk to them about their experience when they got on. What'd you do here? What'd you do there? But as far as I've got the opportunity to go fly your ambulance, or to go to this charter outfit, or hey, this opportunity for flying for a regional came up. Which one of these three should I take? Because I got them all right in front of me at this time. I would go route A, B, or C. And
okay. Let's go and let's talk about inside the cockpit, if you don't mind.
All right.
What do you think? I'm sure that you have to, or that you oblige visitors sometimes, especially with children or with somebody that wants to just come see. I've never seen a pilot be unprofessional and deny. But what surprises most people once they get beyond that secured locked door?
I think it depends. Those that are private pilots that are working towards being a private pilot, I think they're just looking at it and going, wow, this is so much bigger than what I'm sitting in. Obviously, kids are always amazed by it. The airplanes talk a lot. People don't realize that, but we do testing, so we can hit certain switches that light things up or that give us a sound or even a vocalization because we're testing something. So we can hit those when they come in the cockpit, and to see a kid look at that and go, wow. Kids really like sitting in the captain's seat or in the first officer seat, and the airplane I fly doesn't have a traditional yoke. It's fly-by-wire, and it was actually one of the first fly-by-wire commercial aircraft. So we've got a side stick. So they sit there, and the front's all open. You just got the instrument panel. There's no yoke in front of you. There's nothing else. You got a stick on one side and the thrust levers on the other. So they sit there and they look at it, and it's almost like, oh, my brother has a video game like this. Not a video game, but they
right.
say that similar, that familiar control stick.
Wow. So all airplanes aren't yoke steered or however.
No. For a long time they were, and not all airplanes. Your fighter aircraft, your bombers.
Sure.
Most of those were, and even your small airplanes, like the oldest airplane and probably the most fun airplane I've ever flown was a J3 Cub built in 1937. Didn't have a starter. You had to hand prop it, and the gas gauge was a coat hanger on a float that when it floated down in the red, touched the tank, it was time to land. Had a stick. But all your larger aircraft predominantly had yokes, hydraulically controlled. There was kind of a reason for that with the gearing and everything else. And even before hydraulically controlled, when you had cables, it just made sense for a big airplane because now you've got two hands to be able to steer with, up and back with, and plus, we do the rudders, which you don't use a whole lot in the air, especially in modern jets due to yaw dampening, which is computer controlled or hydraulically controlled. Basically using steer on the ground, and when you're down low to straighten things out, or if you have an engine failure or something of that nature when you're at a slow airspeed. But in older aircraft, you do use the rudders a lot more. Or in smaller airplanes, yokes made sense. With a computer-controlled aircraft, or not controlled, but computer-assisted aircraft where the controls are ran through a computer, you don't need that because everything can be put right here. Now, Boeing actually still uses the yoke in their 787s, which is a fly-by-wire aircraft. It still has the yoke. It's not really necessary. It's just that's Boeing's thing.
So if you're using, for my lack of better terms, a joystick type of operation.
That's exactly a side stick, joystick. That's exactly what
okay.
It is.
Do you still have the same control if you lose power, or if something, not catastrophic, but if something that could cause failure? I would watching old movies and such, or you would see them if they started out, they'd just pull back on that, yoke and, try to gain altitude. How does that work now with the joystick or the side stick?
It'd be the same whether it's a side stick, center stick, or a yoke. If you had something that caused the aircraft to lose stability, you're going to pull back. The difference is fly-by-wire aircraft, whether you have a yoke or whether you have a stick, it's going to go through the computers. And you've got multiple computers. It's a triple redundant system.
Okay.
But you can lose the computers. There can be certain failures and malfunctions. The airplane still flies.
Okay.
I have flown the Airbus in direct law due to malfunctions, which is what we call when you've lost all but the basic computer functions. It flies. It flies a lot like a regular airplane. It's not something that we do all the time. We do train for it in the sim, but in reality, very few people, most people who fly the Airbus will never fly it in direct law at all. I guess I drew the short straw on that particular night, but it flies just fine. And the same thing could be, said if you do a hydraulically boosted aircraft, you lose the hydraulics, you're in for a world of hurt. It becomes that's where you go to your systems knowledge. That's where you go to that particular aircraft. That's where you go to your knowledge of flying. You go to your experience. Can I do X, Y, or Z? Because there's only so much you can train for. Certain things happen outside the box, and that's where you have to rely on your knowledge of that particular airplane you're flying and how systems work to help you out in those situations.
Now, you said about the flight pre-checks a few minutes ago that the second officer, which
you could call him a second officer.
Okay, second officer is checking the exteriors. Now,
yes.
I'm sure that all of us and the viewers have seen smaller planes, and they've probably seen the pilots at the airport on the larger planes. But what I've noticed, say on the Cessnas, is they'll actually go out and they're touching every single little part, at least from my memory. How do you do that when the wing is, or is there so many redundancies and checks that the mechanics to the next person, everybody's checking it, and they're just the last one?
Everybody is checking it, and even once we're done, the ground crew does a check.
Okay.
Before we push back, the ground crew does a final check. We're looking to make sure our static ports or pitot tubes are free. We're looking to make sure there's no folds, bends, dings in the metal, because that could indicate, a couple things. A hard landing could indicate that somebody ran into the plane with a service truck. And again, you're not going to go flying till it's checked out. It could indicate, believe it or not, a bird strike. Normally, you're going to have other indications with the bird strike other than just a ding in the metal. There's going to be blood, feathers, that sort of thing. You're looking to make sure there's no fluids leaking. You will see condensation. I mean, if it's 80 degrees out and you put cold gasoline in the fuel tank, it's going to condense under the bottom. You're looking to make sure you don't have hydraulic fluid or something like that. You're checking, there's brake wear indicators, you're checking those. You're making sure your cowlings are closed. Believe it or not, everybody's probably seen on Facebook where planes have taken off and the cowlings weren't closed properly or weren't latched properly, and cowling disappears when you take off. So you're making sure those are done. You're checking the fan blades to make sure there's no nicks, cracks, anything like that. And if you do see one, there are certain things that are certain parameters that are allowed. You can see a nick, maintenance may know about it, but you contact maintenance coming. So yeah, that's blade XYZ. Here's the CDL for it. It was, defer. We've got X number of flight hours. It's safe. It's operable. So that stuff's all in there. So
Okay.
You're checking to make sure your lights work. No dents on the leading edges. You can't reach up and move the ailerons. You can't really move the flaps when they're retracted. And generally, they're retracted at the gate. You can't reach up and shake them. You're making sure there's ice on the aircraft. Do I need to de-ice? Do I not need to de-ice? Those sort of things.
Now, I'm talking about de-icing and things of that nature. Is that typically a computer sensing those things, or do you just know it's temperature, this is the humidity, blah, 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 and you put it together?
There's a couple things. Icing is going to be 10 degrees Celsius or less with visible moisture. Those are called icing conditions. So with that, we're going to take off with engine anti-ice on, regardless of whether there's snow, sleet, ice, even if it's water, that can become ice below 10 degrees when it goes into the engine. We'll take off with engine anti-ice on, but as far as on the aircraft for de-icing or anti-icing, you're going to look to see if there's ice on the aircraft for de-icing, and then for anti-icing, do we have active rain, not rain, snow, freezing rain, something of that nature that requires us to have a protective coating put on. And the way that coating works, put it on the wings, tail, critical surfaces, and it accumulates the precip. And then when you take off, everything slides off the wing.
Okay. Now, is there any adjustments, say, from your takeoff elevation to altitude? Is there any adjustments with that type of stuff? You talked about you do your anti-icing to take off.
You have performance limitations because the anti-icing runs off a bleed air system, so it takes power from the engine. Okay. So if you have engine anti-ice, there's a certain performance hit. If you put wing anti-ice on, there's another performance hit, and in the Airbus, that's a big performance hit. Fortunately, the way the Airbus was designed, we're allowed to take off in icing conditions without wing anti-ice, just being de-iced and anti-iced exteriorly to a certain point, because the performance hit's so big, and the way the aircraft's designed to allow for anti-icing, and it slides off. However, what we look at that is we have what we call it's an ice indicator. Basically, it looks like a bolt sticking between the front of the two cockpit windscreens, and if that develops ice, there's no chime. You just have to look at it. But if you see it developing ice, you turn on the wing anti-ice when you're in the air. And the engine anti-ice, it's the same parameters as on the ground. Below 10 degrees Celsius and visible moisture, you're going to turn on the anti-ice.
Now, what are your flights? I believe that I heard you say that you fly across the pond.
Yes.
Well, let me ask this first. How do you get long enough in the air to where you autopilot?
We have to autopilot.
You have to. Okay.
There's
Interesting.
RVSM airspace, which is above 290, flight level 290, up to, I want to say it's 42,000 feet. You're required to have the autopilot on. And if you have a situation where the autopilot is not functional, you're required to either climb above it, which we're not going to do in an Airbus 321 or 320 or 319, or you will dive below it. You'll go back down to the lower flight levels. So what that does is by everybody being on autopilot, it allows them to reduce the vertical separation between aircraft from 2,000 feet to 1,000 feet.
Okay.
So everybody's on autopilot. You know how it responds. Before they even allowed it, thousands of tests were done. So that's reduced vertical separation, and that's what allows that reduced vertical separation, and that allows more aircraft to be throughout not just the national airspace system, but the airspace system in Europe and Asia, going across the pond on either side. You can just put more planes in the same piece of sky.
Do you ever have to make decisions, high pressure decisions, either taking off, landing, any unforeseen circumstances? Is that a typical thing that pilots run into anymore?
Well, do I take off or do I not take off? That decision is usually made before you get to the end of the runway. Occasionally it'll be, with icing conditions, there's certain checks you do. Do we take off? Do we not? Do we need to go back and de-ice? The entire time you're taking off, there's a philosophy. We've got a certain point where it's actually safer to go flying after that point if you have a malfunction than it is to try to stop the aircraft. So from the time we set power until we hit 80 knots, we're thinking abort for just about anything that comes up.
Okay.
There's a few things, such as if your thrust levers aren't matched up exactly, you'll get a chime. Okay, I can match those up and keep going.
Okay.
A few other minor things that you're not gonna stop the aircraft for, but to 80 knots, we're stop minded. We're gonna stop. We're gonna take a look and see what's going on. Obviously pull off the runway, and we'll think about doing this again. Or we'll go back to the gate. Above 80 knots, we're kind of go-minded. So those are going to be safety of flight issues. Those are going to be, we have an engine fire failure. We have a door come open. We have something that we've got my aircraft, that's what's called an ECAM. So it's going to give us a red ECAM. And there's certain yellow ECAMs, which are cautions as well. Those come up, we're stopping the airplane. Then we get to what we call V1, which is the decision speed. After this V1 speed, we're going flying. I mean, unless the airplane just will not fly, you're going flying.
Okay.
So, and because it's going to be the odds of stopping the aircraft safely have diminished now to a point where it's highly unlikely you're going to have a safe abort, and you're going to be better off, and it's going to be safer to take the airplane in the air, fix the problem, come back around and land.
I'm sure in your 20 years plus that you have seen or felt some crazy stuff. What's your, or I say crazy, dangerous, or whatever might throw a captain off?
I think everybody that's flown any amount of times probably had a malfunction or two. There's been a few where we've come back. I had years ago when I was flying a regional jet, had the landing gear not come up. So flew around Cincinnati. That was based there at the time for about an hour and 40 minutes to burn off gas because it wasn't dangerous, but the gear wouldn't come up. So we put the gear down, burned off gas, came back in and landed. There's been other things I've had. Flaps fail coming in. There's been a problem with a flap harness or a wiring issue where the flaps have failed coming in. Actually, the last airplane I flew, that was one of things that had happened the most. I think it had happened 2 or 3 times. Funny thing about that, the last time I had it happen, we're running procedures and basically in a hold, circling somewhere, and just off from the airport to run all our procedures and try to troubleshoot it before we came in for a landing. We're only about 4,000 feet, and you're not supposed to use cell phones on the aircraft, and there's a reason for that. But we landed, and safely, no issues. One of the customers is getting off the aircraft, and she says, I called my friend when we were circling. He's a private pilot, and he said you were doing all the right things.
Well,
so
that's a great pat on the back and a kind of a pop in the mouth at the same time,
yeah,
is it not?
Exactly.
Well, you mentioned the cell phone usage. I didn't even think about asking you this until right now. Tell the folks why it is so important to put on airplane mode on the phone or to not use it, and when they say don't use it. What's the reason behind that?
There's a couple reasons. First reason, the older airplanes, and most of these aren't in service anymore, and the older telephones, the old analog phones, the big Nokia bricks we all had, they were about the size of a dollar bill.
Sure.
First commercial airplane I flew, Jetstream 32. It would affect the instruments.
Really?
The aircraft did not have shielding, and the signal was so strong on those phones, it would actually affect the instruments. You would see fluctuations. You could also hear them in the headsets. Remember one time I'm flying, I can't remember where it was, we're going back to 2000, but I do remember there was a guy talking to his stockbroker, and it was coming through our headsets.
Wow, insider trading at high altitudes.
So, and it's like, hey, make sure your cell phones are off, made the PA, and the guy covered himself up with a blanket, and that airplane didn't have a door. It was 19 people, and it's like, no, we said turn the cell phone off, not cover your head with a blanket. Because you could hear it, and so there's interference with aircraft systems, and these are mostly the older phones. The newer phones, the digital phones, obviously the sound quality is better for us, they're lighter, they also aren't as strong, and aircraft are now being made to be shielded from them. So there you get into, there's a chance they could set off a sensor in the aircraft, and more than likely that would be a smoke detector or something of that nature. So while it's going to cause a lot of panic, probably not do much, to affect the safety of the flight. Another reason is, and this is where most people don't realize, there's a huge FCC fine, because up at altitude, you're not hitting one tower. You could light up 20 or 30 towers with that cell phone call.
So where does FCC, at what altitude does that become federal airspace? Is it at 10,000 feet?
Well, that's kind of two different things. The FCC basically controls communication, so it doesn't matter whether you're at 10,000 feet or 2,000 feet or right here like we are right now. The FCC is the regulatory body for communications. As far as law enforcement goes, it becomes federal when they close the cockpit door.
Okay.
So it's kind of two different things, but as far as law enforcement goes, if you're talking who gets involved, is it going to be a local police department, is it going to be the FBI or Customs and Border Patrol or something like that? The second the cockpit door is closed, it becomes a federal issue.
Shifting a little bit, how do you and your other pilots,
My crew.
your crew, but other pilots just in a back room somewhere.
Okay.
Do y'all talk differently than, say, you and I talk? I mean, because I know that I can talk to an electrician in a different language than I can talk to my buddy that does not do electrical work. Is that more technical and for you as well?
It's kind of the same thing. I mean, there are certain acronyms we use that those get thrown around all the time. And it's funny because I'll be talking to my girlfriend and I'll throw around one of those acronyms and she's like, yeah, you have to tell me what that means. So, yeah, we talk with the acronyms, but, it's kind of funny. There's an old adage, and it's, pilots talk about women when they're by themselves. And, of course, obviously female pilots don't, for the most part. And then when they're with women, they talk about airplanes.
Relate.
But anyway, yes, just like any other, like doctors, they have their own lingo that they use when they talk with each other. And even if they're not discussing a case, just when they're talking, it's kind of a separate, almost a separate society. And this is what just like you were talking about with electricians, you can talk with another electrician, and the average person is going to catch every fourth word as being something that they understand.
Are there any pilots that, and you don't have to mention names, of course, but are there any pilots that you've ever run across that you just look at and shake your head and say, I don't know how they became pilots?
No, flying since late '97. I'm sure I've ran into a few. The fortunate thing is extremely low amount at the airline level. They get weeded out.
Sure.
No matter how much you want to do it and no matter how much money you throw at it, at the end of the day, 99.9% of the people, just like in most professions that kind of are on that level, they're not going to make it. It's gonna wind up being too much studying, too much work, too many demands, and they're going to bow out. They're just if they can't cut it, it's eventually going to affect them. They're like, this is just not worth it anymore.
Gotcha. I've noticed in my experience when talking to pilots or listening to pilots, I love listening to the air traffic.
Mm-hmm.
My dad has been a flight simulator captain for at least since the first Tandy came out, I believe in 1995. But I've always loved to hear the chatter between the pilot and
Air traffic control.
They're very specific in the wording.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's never a misnomer. There's never, what do you find that you or does it take you any time once you get out of the pilot mode to go out into the public to get out of that, choosing every word carefully? I think that comes with our age anyway. The older we get, the more mature we get, we've realized that we've just wasted a lot of meaningless words over time,
mm-hmm.
And they're lost. But do you find that you ever have a hard time of going away from the very sharp language?
No, I've I think when you first start, you're so focused on doing everything correctly, doing everything by the book. And not that you become less focused, but now as you spend more time in it, you've got experience. So, then you you step out of the cockpit and you cut that switch off.
Right.
Unless you need to do it for a briefing or you're talking about something with the flight, you cut the switch off. It's like, okay, I'm done. And air traffic control and aviation does things the way they do, pilot controller communication, because you can get too many people on the line. You can have too much chatter. So keep it short, keep it sweet, and direct. So, and the most you're going to hear from ATC is going to be 3 instructions at one time. It would be, and I'll just give an example. Okay, JetBlue Flight 3, turn heading 270, descend maintain 20,000 feet, or flight level 200, and slow to 250 knots. You're not going to get that fourth thing until you comply with the first 3, because they will overload you, and that's based on science. You can give somebody 3 commands, but when you give them that 4th command in short order, something's going to drop off.
Okay. I learned in business school that was the KISS method.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys use that as well?
Yeah, that's it. Keep it simple. I mean,
Okay.
that's there's no need to overcomplicate things if you don't have to.
Okay.
So, but that's what we try to do. It's keep it simple. You can brief something to death. You can explain something to death. But if you can do it in 15 words, then why not?
Sure. All right. Well, let's take a quick break, and then I'm really excited about this next section with UAPs and things of that nature, if you want to cover that.
All right, we'll cover it.
All right.
Oh, can we pause for just a second? If you haven't already liked and subscribed, I would much appreciate it. Small channels like mine need every single bit of help that we can get. Not begging or anything, but yeah, I'm kind of begging.
All right, so let's talk about UAPs and unknown stuff, UFOs. Have you ever seen anything that you just couldn't explain?
I've seen a lot of stuff that initially is unexplainable, but when asking the right questions or digging into it, it's explainable. I don't mean like 6 weeks later. I mean kind of right there on the spot. I remember one time flying out to, I can't remember if it was Seattle or San Francisco, and we're watching this group of lights that is doing loops and barrel rolls and the whole 9 yards in formation. It looks like miles in front of us. And we're watching this for about 40 minutes, and finally somebody keys a mic somewhere, and you hear a, I guess I'll be the guy to jump on the grenade. Does anybody else see those lights out there that's doing loops and rolls and everything? And then instantly you had probably 10 or 15 people, yeah, we see them, and then ATC hops on and says, that's this satellite, gave the name of the satellite, and it's coming out of orbit. Sure enough, when we land, we look up, Google, that satellite was coming out of orbit. Now, many people would have looked and said, that's a UFO. Okay, when we first saw it, yes, it was a UFO, unidentified flying object, or unidentified flying phenomenon. Asked the right question, we got the answer, and it was verifiable. Not somebody told us, but you could look up and see where it was XYZ satellite that was coming out of orbit, and that's what it was doing. It was tumbling. More recently this year, going across over to Europe, look up, there's a string of lights going in front, and just straight string of lights. It looks like somebody took a Christmas light and strung it out over the night sky, but it's moving away from us, going the same direction we're going. Wound up being Starlink and all the satellites that hadn't spread out yet.
So do they send those up in like one batch and then break off, or
that I'm not sure about, but that was the Starlink satellites that just haven't, I guess, been spread out into their formation yet. So, that being said, I'll say an acquaintance, one of my ex-wife's friends, her ex-husband, for those that are into unidentified flying phenomenon, was the F-18 Growler pilot who they've got the HUD camera from with the Tic Tac UFO where it's going all around, and they're tracking him on their FLIR and their HUD. And that was that guy. I haven't talked to him about it. Didn't even know that he had that experience until that video came out. But he was one of those guys. So, yeah, I do know people that have seen something that at least to them could not be explained, and there's been no other explanation. I myself have not. I've got a friend at JetBlue who swears he sees them all the time, and other people debunk it pretty steadily with, oh, this is this or this is that. But I think, do they exist? I don't know. I think that if you're inclined to believe they exist, they're going to exist,
Sure.
Whether they do or not. And if you're inclined to believe they don't exist, you're going to find a way to say they don't exist. The answer comes back to, do they really exist? We don't know. I find it hard to believe that as big as the universe is, that we're the only intelligent life out there.
It's really hard to believe. In fact, the older I get, the more that I think about that the possibility is greater than I've always been taught, that there is something else out there. Maybe not looks like us, maybe not thinks like us, but something else. The theories of the Greys or whatever that come here, that they're just us, but 3,000 years and they've come back in time travel and all this kind of stuff. That, there's a lot of holes that you can go down with that stuff. But the thing is, I would agree that it's possible, don't know the probability, that we're not alone in the great, vast, dark space.
Now, I'll agree with you on that. And, I know growing up, I heard, well, the Bible says it's only us. The Bible A, doesn't say it's only us. And it doesn't say there can't be other worlds. And it says, we're made in God's image, and we assume that's the physical image. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it's, I think, more so the emotional, the spiritual image that we were created in God. And so maybe the physical is part of it. Maybe there are other beings out there that look similar to us, if not the same. They may look vastly different, but from a spiritual standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, from kind of the way they operate, the way they think, they're somewhat more similar to us because God created us in His image. Then He's created others in His image as well.
Yeah.
It would stand to reason.
Yeah. Do you think there's anything behind, and we may go off on a different little tangent here, but there's a lot about von Braun, the Nazi scientist, who I believe it was 19 other scientists or maybe 29 other scientists that were brought over, and they started NASA or created NASA. A couple things with that rabbit hole. He was very specific. Von Braun was very specific that we could not get past a certain threshold off of this planet. And he made, and I'll try to bring that up in here, was very specific. And then Elon has come out later talking about there's no way that we could have gone to the moon. We would have had to have refueled 15 times. And he gives all these explanations about why we could not have gone to the moon. There again, I've only seen the footage. There's some questionable things, but it's all black and white and grainy, all that to tie back into, there's conspiracy theories about everything. And as we were talking earlier, explain to me what you were saying earlier about the 50 things and only having 2 to be true.
You can come up with a conspiracy theory. If you can find 1 or 2 things that are true, or at least plausible, you can sell your conspiracy theory because you've got 2 things that are believable. Either provable or believable because they make sense to most people. Then you can sell the rest of it. And that goes for just about anything. Whether it be spaceflight, landing on the moon, chemtrails, vaccine stuff. There's all sorts of things out there that you can kind of, if you have just enough truth, you can sell the rest of whatever you want it to be.
What's the most outlandish conspiracy theory that you've been approached about and had to just shut it down quick?
Probably 2, and that's going to be chemtrails and flat Earth.
Okay. Yeah, those tend to be very big.
We don't have a chemtrail switch on the aircraft. We actually, as part of our training, go through and learn a lot of the airplane, a lot of the systems, or certain things. If you had chemtrails systems involved or installed in the aircraft that we didn't know about, it's going to show up somewhere in schematics because it's going to affect weight and balance. It's somewhere there's going to be, what's that part? What's that doing? I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying it's extremely low probability. Flat Earth, I've seen the curvature of the Earth. I don't have anything else to tell you.
Right.
People don't believe it. They don't believe it. If they do, they do. But I've seen it. So.
I agree with a lot of the pilots that I've seen, especially the B-2 bomber pilots and the. I'm sorry, I messed up that on the B-52. Which one is it? The one that's got the really long, wide wingspan.
B-52.
That they have to use the.
That's the B-52. That's the one whose grandkids are flying the airplanes their grandfathers flew.
Okay. I've seen footage from those, and I've seen the curvature of the Earth. So I put that to bed shortly after I heard it. Anything else that you want to say on that I can?
No, those are the two big ones I've heard. As far as the moonshot goes, a guy I did most of my check rides with when I was a student and who I sent most of my students to, a guy named Clyde Shelton. He worked with von Braun. Knew him personally. Clyde's actually in the Alabama and the Tennessee Aviation Hall of Fame. Fantastic guy. Passed away a few years ago. Good guy. Taught me, I learned more on check rides with him than I ever did teaching people. I learned more taking my students for check rides with him than I ever did teaching people. He was just a wealth of information and practical information, and a really good pilot too. But unless Clyde was extremely well at hiding things, there were pictures of von Braun and stuff all over his office. He knew all the original Mercury 7 astronauts and the Gemini astronauts. He retired from NASA. He was a plank holder with NASA. So, you can punch holes in a lot of things. You're punching a whole lot of holes to try to say we didn't land on the moon.
Right.
I mean, people want to believe it, they can believe it, but there's too much data outside of grainy photos that say we were there, we've been there. There's too much data where here's a shot taken 20 years later of a satellite circling the moon that shows the American flag or the base from one of the lunar rovers, or not rovers, but lunar landing craft. So, you've got to jump through extraordinary hoops to figure out how that stuff got there to say, well, we didn't go to the moon, we just sent stuff up to park there.
Sure.
You can do it, but you got to throw a whole lot of things up there to justify your belief.
Right. Do you think there's a reason why we haven't been back to the moon?
Cost.
Cost
And the benefits from what we could gain from the moon. Kendi said we're going to do it because it's hard. We went there. At the time, there was no way to monetize what was on the moon. Now we're looking at going to Mars. Well, my limited knowledge on this says launching from the Earth to go to Mars would be extremely problematic, but you could launch from the Earth to the moon and then launch from the moon to Mars when it's in the right position, and it's a lot less problematic.
Okay. Any thoughts on, going back to the UAP stuff, any thoughts on Antarctica or the North Pole, especially Antarctica? And I know that we didn't discuss this previously, but it just came up when talking about that.
They're both cold.
They're both cold.
They're both cold.
They're both cold.
I don't think there's any aliens hiding out underneath there.
No big hole where ships
no
are
big
going
bay.
into the curve.
The only ships I know that have gone under it has been submarines. I mean, I had an uncle that was on the Nautilus when it first went under it, and the North Pole. But I've had friends that are retired Air Force that have flown the missions down to the South Pole. They've never mentioned seeing anything that would even raise a question as to what is this. People talk about the Northern Lights. Again, it's explainable. Now, you can actually recreate what's going on in a lab if you choose to with the Northern Lights. So,
And that's one of the big reasons why I wanted to talk to you and ask you this, because I know you. I've known you almost all my life. And even with the time between us seeing each other and then today,
Mhm.
I still believe that the truth is too important to you and for your life for you to put anything else out. And that's one of the big things about America is Calling, is that I want to talk to those people that there's no payola, there's nothing behind them just telling their story. And I think it's so important because a lot of times, especially with YouTube and Rumble and those things, we see the same people on everybody's show that are telling the same story. So that's the only story that's getting out. And you know, I can appreciate an honest conversation, hitting direct questions with no emotion, no feelings, just facts, and here it is. You know, make of it what you will, but this is what I know, and I appreciate that. So let's go into a different or down. Let's go down one of the paths that you mentioned a few minutes ago, with creation and God, basically faith, purpose, and life. Has flying changed your view about God or about faith or anything like that?
I wouldn't say it changed it, but it's definitely, you look at a sunrise or you look at the sunset, and to me, it is kind of confirmed that, and I don't care whether you're Christian or Hindu or Jewish or name one of the other 50,000 religions. It's confirmed to me that there's something out there bigger than us, because I find it a much bigger leap of faith to think that happened randomly by something that nothing put together exploded and randomly third planet from a ball of hot gas developed life.
Yeah.
So I think, you see the sun come up, you see something like the Northern Lights. Yes, you can recreate the Northern Lights in a lab, and so it's provable. It's not something it's not provable, but there's so many things that you can't. The beauty that's there. You can paint it, but if you ask a painter who had never seen a sunrise to paint a sunrise, what are they going to paint?
Right.
If you ask somebody to paint a forest and they've never seen a forest, never read about a forest, what are they going to paint?
Right.
It came from somewhere.
It had to have. We're in what they call the Goldilocks zone.
Mm-hmm.
A few thousand miles or a few 100,000 miles or whatever in a different direction, we wouldn't be where we are. I mean, there's no way that we could exist. That's why the two planets closer to the sun, they have no chance of having life, and or that we know of right now. And the ones past us, they're outside the Goldilocks zone. So I also believe that there is a grand creator or an original, creator. Has there been any times when you have felt, I say, the presence of the Lord or presence of God with you, whether it be in the plane, whether it be in learning, or just life in general? But I guess really more so towards your professional career, that you felt, maybe that you saw something, like you saw a particular sunrise, like as you alluded to, and said, wow, man, that is all just God right there.
I mean, I've said that with sunrises or certain sunsets a couple times. It's you just look at it and it's like, wow, this is it's a pretty amazing sight to see. It's like I said, I got the best office view in the world. As far as feeling God's presence, Probably not so much in an airplane. I know there are people that say they have, especially if they've had, some sort of, we'll say near catastrophic event, that the only explanation for them is why it wasn't a catastrophic event is divine intervention. I've been pretty fortunate and have not experienced something of that nature. But I'll say, when my mom passed, I could tell that God was in that room, in her hospital room. So,
Yeah.
the funny thing was, I don't think she was anymore. Her body was, but I think she was already gone.
Yeah. Well, Bible does say to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord, And if I believe one part of the Bible, I got to believe it all, And by the way, I when talking about memories, I remember your mother a lot from elementary school. Very sweet, very just a very sweet lady, very encouraging. To me, she was, because I had the stutter, and it was nothing, for her to see me get frustrated and come make a comment, whether it's keep your chin up or don't let that bother you, or you sounded just fine, and I know that we've not discussed that before, but like I said, man, I've been knowing you a lot of years, and it seems like those foundational memories have just carried me through,
Yeah, but see, you got sent to the principal's office. I got sent to mom's room. That was a different story.
Yeah.
I was asking to go to the principal's office.
Do you know any pilots, or do you have any type of like superstitions or things that you do, like you've seen baseball players that won't step on the white line, or that they'll step in and out of the batter's box a couple of times? Do pilots or anybody like that have certain things?
Maybe. I haven't seen it. The most stuff I've seen is somebody's got like a flat Stanley they're carrying for their kids. It's not superstitious. It's just they're bringing something. Or they've got a little bobblehead that they put in the cockpit when they fly. It's their flight buddy. Nothing superstitious with it. Just they started doing it at some point in time to be funny, and it's just kind of carried through with them. I don't know anybody that really does anything superstitious from that nature. Everybody's got their own thing. I wear a baseball cap when I fly. It's a Rolling Stones cap, one of my favorite bands. You're likely to hear it the first part before we run the checklist. I'm probably going to have the Stones, or may have Black Label Society, or the Pretty Reckless. Or I'm going to have music on for a little bit until we get to the point where we've got to run the checklist and go sterile cockpit, and then that's going to be shut off. And that's not every time, but it's sometimes. So, I think when Ozzy passed away, I played Black Sabbath when people were boarding the airplane. You couldn't hear it. If you stepped your head into the cockpit, you could hear it, but we were going over to England, so I'm like, this would be kind of appropriate. So.
Right. I've noticed that, and we'll just say that you've shared some pictures that you and your boys go to a lot of concerts. And I think it's so cool to see y'all dressed up with the Kiss makeup, or, I think that might have been at Halloween,
That's
it
Halloween.
not?
That's Halloween. We don't dress up for concerts.
Right. But I'm just saying that because music is a very important part of my life. And I know that it has to be in yours, and you've passed that down, the love of that, which when I see that kind of stuff, and y'all are seeing, you've gone to this particular concert, that's a band that most people of this generation don't even have a clue who they were. The kids today don't, that's oldies music. But that's back when music was music. I mean, and it was written by the man or the woman that's singing it. It was penned on a notebook with a Sharpie or whatever they could do. It wasn't inputted into a computer and spit out and fine-tuned and all that. Now they had their own editing and did certain things for mix and balance. But to see that being passed down, that your kids know who Motley Crue is, or they know who Kiss is, and that not just Gene Simmons from the Family Jewels show. I think that's what it was called.
I think you're right.
But they actually know what Peter Criss' makeup was. They know what the star on Paul Stanley was. They know that Gene Simmons was the demon, and that's just so cool to, are there any other major ones that stick out? You mentioned Black Label Society. Of course, Black Sabbath has always been one of my favorite, with Ozzy, and Ozzy with Black Sabbath and solo. There again, I digress, but it was just cool to see that you're passing that down to your kids. All right, are you ready for the rapid fire? These are I put out a week or so ago that I was going to be interviewing a JetBlue pilot. I didn't give any background on our relationship or anything. I just said, what are some quick questions that you'd like to ask a pilot? So if you're ready, this is rapid fire.
All right, let's roll it.
The first one was submitted by my last guest, Volker. And then I'm going to ask you to submit something for my next guest. I'm not going to reveal who that is yet. So the first question, window or aisle?
Aisle.
Favorite airport?
Amsterdam.
Worst airport?
Hartsfield.
One thing that passengers stop doing?
Putting their carry-on bags in the overhead bin when they first get on the aircraft. Wait till you're close to your seat.
What is one thing that pilots appreciate more so than the average person?
Silence.
What is your favorite view from the cockpit?
Oh, it's got to be the sunrise over the Atlantic.
Well, thank you so much, man. I really do appreciate your time. I look forward to a different episode to where we can discuss some other things. I know this was really quick, and I appreciate you, taking what I sent you and say, yeah, we can work with this. But I am curious, and I know that after viewers see this, that there's going to be a lot of questions. I get typically 20 to 25 questions from interviews. So if you don't mind, I may get back with you as a follow-up and say, hey, this were the ones that people sent in, and would you answer these? So
All right.
again, I really appreciate your time.
America is calling, and thank goodness that Chris answered my call. I wanted to hear from an airline pilot, and he said, hey, I'll do whatever you need, man. I'll come in, and he answered my questions. But if he didn't get to yours, please feel free again to leave them down in the comments. We will make sure that they are answered. Again, thank you for watching. I'm Chuck Norman, and America is calling.